Christmas Eve was so interesting. I was sitting and watching stuff on my phone and computer, and all of a sudden I started tearing up. I couldn't directly understand why. This wasn't the first Christmas that I had been alone for, but it was certainly the first one in a few years where I didn't have a job and was even less hopeful about the incoming year. Was it the fact that I, for the first time in a long time, felt getting a job was not possible? Was it that on certain anniversaries that featured recurring appearances from the same group of departed relatives I mentioned from time to time, I frequently recall what their routines were on that day and how they intersected with mine? Was it because of something I was watching? It was my intention to stream on Christmas, which had been like a little routine I've done for the last few years. But what happened is that, and I did a video covering this, I went to this place I get my car fixed at, and they told me that the repairs were extensive, but that it should take about 3 days for them to do this. That was last Saturday. They gave me the estimate of being finished by this past Monday, which has not occurred yet, and that's my main place to record stuff, at least on camera, so it just kind of all fell through because they were taking way longer than they said they would. So sometimes when a person admits to either being depressed or, bothered by something recurringly, consistently, you have these people who will suggest that that person, go and speak to a therapist. I've even had that written in my comment section. Now, I've talked before about how in the past I've attempted that. It didn't work at all. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that a therapist is not going to be able to make a person who is upset that they don't have a job suddenly be hired somewhere. A therapist isn't going to make you stop missing somebody. Just they're it's not something I would waste my time with for those reasons. But or should I say, waste my time further with for those reasons, right? Not rely on it anymore. But I don't think people are wrong to be depressed when someone they care about dies. It's like, I have to explain this because there are some people who seem to genuinely not understand this perspective. Being close to someone and not being able to be with them anymore can often feel like the equivalent of having your arm ripped off. The pain is at its worst when it first happens, and you might take medication. You might be told by people that time heals all wounds, but it never really goes away. It's hard to live with someone, eat with them, drive places with them, talk to them on, I'd say, a daily basis, and then they're just suddenly not there anymore. Even if you have an idea of like, oh, this person is sick, to go from being able to interact with them to no longer being able to do that, I think is a legitimate whiplash. I had an associate about 4 or 5 years ago who said that she was going to end her life if her dad died. And, I would rather that she not. And of course, we don't speak anymore, so I don't know if he got sicker or if she, I don't know how it all turned out. But I did not attempt to tell her, oh, you'll feel better. Oh, you'll get over his possible passing if you speak to a therapist. Because I've been on the receiving end of that stuff for so long that it's not really within me to say that to another person. Like, if I don't believe in it myself, I'm not going to peddle it to somebody else. You can kind of infer what the relationships between people are, even if you're not fully aware of all the different parties. Like, you can tell she loves her dad, and the thought of him not being around anymore is something that she just can't take, and possibly can't take to the extent of just calling it quits on even, being alive herself. And again, it's like, I'm not saying I support her doing that. Possibly. I don't know if she went through with it. But I am not going to pretend that I don't understand it. You know, when he died, it was like a permanent rejection of the idea that I would ever know any lasting happiness. You know, there are still things that make me happy, you know, such as finishing some long-term project, the prospect of having a job that allows me to take care of myself, you know, or getting to hang out with people the rare times that occurs in real life. But for the most part, I know that there is a hole inside of me that will never be filled. You know, we did everything together. He was the only relative that would read different scripts I would write. Actually, I think, yeah, he was the first person I drew in, like, in terms of real life people. You know, he was so versatile in terms of what kind of things you could discuss with him. Again, like different story ideas, the news, just all sorts of stuff. There was really no topic that was off limits or that he wasn't willing to listen to. And I can say with complete sincerity that over the past 8 years, there has not been a single day where I have not thought of him. And I know I'm not what I was before he passed compared to now. Because like I said, I recognized the difference. I didn't have the feeling of, oh man, what would this person think of this? What would he think of that? If I were to put this in video game terms, the death of a person you're close with is like a completion of the main story of a video game, and anything afterward is DLC. You know, there are appealing or positive aspects of DLC, but none of that would ever be expected to match the main story. Look, I have admittedly gotten offended by the platitudes of people when they are trying to assure me that things are going to improve. I had the one relative that said, you never know what life has in store, and all this, just, again, like just worthless talk, right? But the reason that that's offensive is because one could argue, like if you wanted to claim, oh, this person, you know, from an objective standpoint, you don't know exactly what's going to happen tomorrow. Okay, let's all agree to that. But basic pattern recognition skills are not a hard thing to acknowledge. If you felt like crap the first year after your mother died, there's a good chance you're going to feel like crap the second year after your mother died. If you felt like trash, like you wanted to die yourself for the first 5 years following your father's passing, there's a good chance the next 5 years after that, you will feel like trash and wanting to die, you know, once we get to the 10th anniversary as well. And that's why those types of comments are so offensive, because you have a person who wants to assert this idea that because they're older than you, they have some kind of like advanced manual on how your life is going to go that also completely overrides or ignores, or I should say sidesteps, the fact that you are simply making observations based in what has occurred already. You know, because I often talk about how, and we'll get more into this a little bit later, but, you know, with the job stuff, I've worked places where I genuinely was satisfied with the work I was getting, the amount I was getting paid, whatever. And, you know, that's obviously something where if someone wanted to tell me, oh, I think you'll get a job, even if I am more likely to think it's not going to happen anytime soon, I still would feel like there's a sense this could occur again because it's happened before, right? I was with the same company for 18 months, and before that it never worked anywhere near as long previously. You know, with the woman stuff, people sit there and they give all these little fantasy versions of chicks that are going to be, you know, I call it the magic woman, but it's like with the relative, you know, and relatives, I should say, I know what I'm missing. Like I don't have to imagine something that already happened. So again, we have these like ideas of decent, you know, relationships with women or whatever, where we talk about the, you know, how you see people guys who are married, have kids, they look like they're happy. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't, but at least from what you can see, they appear to be happy. people that have high paying jobs appear to be happy with, their job, whatever. But it's like, again, we're going off of what we imagine somebody else to be feeling. If I know that there was a time where I could get up on, it could be Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and have several people I would call to either speak to or go over the house of, and then I wake up one year and that's no longer feasible because those people have died. uh it's not like an abstraction for me to say, yeah, it looks like things are just getting worse and worse. And then again, when you compound that with the lack of either available people in terms of platonic stuff, or women that you would even be able to build a family with, because they're all like against having children, it's not hard to see where someone would feel like, yeah, every year is just going to be more and more subtraction until you just don't have any reason to go on anymore. And I don't like saying this because, I can believe that the people who push it have good intentions. They're not saying that to insult you or to completely ignore what your problems are, but it still stands to reason that if they're not going to address what you're saying, right, like have substantive rebuttals to the points you're making, it's just more worthless talk. Because I know that things are objectively worse for me than they were, even 4 years ago. In fact, I was even having a conversation with my friend the other day. We were talking about how, with just how garbage the job market is. It's reminding me a lot of 2020, right? And that was a period where places were not hiring anybody. If you even got hired somewhere, you had to wear this mask all day long. A lot of businesses were closing because we had the pandemic going on and the whole stay-at-home orders. And it was just a time where getting work was harder than, I would say, at any point between 2008, when we had the subprime mortgage crisis, and now. And during that year, I had a relative. She helped me in basic ways. Had somewhere to stay, food, and I really dread to think what that year would have looked like for me if she hadn't have been around. Like, that's it actually really disturbs, because with the ones I talk about as a kid, and even past that point, there were always these different people who were like, oh, they love you, they care so much about you, all the again, more just like reassurances of some supposed concern, but they don't reflect that in any of their actions, right? It's just people just saying things. And with her, she walked the walk, and I really, I'm not kidding when I say, if I had to redo that year without her, I think I probably would have just died, because these surviving ones have shown they have no regard or concern for me whatsoever. And we're going to get into this a little bit later. You have these people that talk about, oh, you're an adult, you should be able to take care of yourself. It's like, yeah, that's cool, that's a nice concept in theory to have, but like, truly, during a period where most people live paycheck to paycheck, during a period where jobs are just not available. That's why you see all these videos getting uploaded about all these ghost jobs and fake crap. I think older adults should look at the ones who are, younger, and help them, in basic ways. And that's what she did. And that's why I know I'm never going to feel like you're out of line for, thinking that your parental figure should do that. Like, I could never have a son or a daughter and not support them in basic ways, like not charging them to live with me when I know they don't have a damn job, while also not helping them to get basic things like food or gas. It's like, it's scumbag stuff to do that. I really believe that. And also, I should say, I know people will claim that they don't think adults should get help when stuff is just expensive, which it is all across America. We always talk about the rising costs and everything's always going up. But I know from all of the years of antagonism, right? People have attacked me over what I wear. They've attacked me over my voice. They mocked my spectacles. They insulted my humble origins. And I'm supposed to really believe that this same group of people, if they found out I had a kid, even if they were an adult and I wasn't helping them, just like a total deadbeat, nobody would criticize that? I'm supposed to really believe that. And I guess maybe that plays into why I don't feel embarrassed like admitting stuff online. Because it's like, look at the stuff people do in real life that no one ever criticizes. So I just want to spend a few minutes on corporate greed. Now, I criticize employers. I think they are terrible people. I think they are vampires that can walk out in the sun. Just scumbags. But the reason I'm so critical of them is very simple. You have some companies that are very large, right? Make billions of dollars. They have founders who, again, they're not millionaires, they are billionaires. And every single time one of these bastards makes a lot of money, no matter how much money they make, they always look for a way to screw over the people underneath them. You know, I was making this point to one of my friends because they were saying, you know, oh, the $20 minimum wage, it made it to where our jobs are only giving us 4 and 5 hour shifts. I explained to them that the real issue, right, is the issue of underwork, right, of companies being able to hire people and then just decide that they're only going to get a few, single digit number of hours to actually come to their job. And, this is basically a reverse version of how things were before I believe was the Fair Labor Standards Act, the FLSA, where it used to be that prior to that law, companies could just have you working for 50 hours or 60 for like $2 or whatever was like meager money, right? And the idea behind that law, setting the 40-hour limit, was to stop people from being used so much while being paid so little. There was an understanding that you needed some type of rest to be able to then go back to work and be expected to function in a way that was beneficial to the company and yourself. And the reverse version of it, right, with Walmart and all these other places, is that they know that the FLSA didn't have it has a maximum but not a floor. So you can't get away with paying people so little, using them so much. So you pay them so little by using them very little. And I explained to my pal, I said, the company I was with last year, I think this year, they made $1 billion in profits, right? All their food was selling all across America. And what I explained to him is that what's really sad about this, because oftentimes when you say you hope a business fails, oh my God, how could you say that? Do you want the people working there to get fired and it'll mess up the economy and blah, blah, blah? It's like, again, the problem here is that, one, we already know all these businesses are trying to squeeze out everybody's job with these stupid AIs. But secondly, my point I'm making when I talk about, what their profits are and how little their employees are making is that it doesn't matter, whether they make 1 billion, 2 billion, 3 billion, 4 billion, 5 billion, whatever number you want to pull out of there. The only people that make more money when they see record sales are the CEOs and the founder. Like, nobody else gets a benefit. If you're working for let's say Walmart, right? And they make, just again, hypothetical number, 5 billion, 2025. I'm not saying they made this, just as throwing it as an example. And then in 2026, they're going to make 10 billion. The only people that benefit from them increasing their profits are the guys at the top. They'll take home some more money, and all their employees will still get $30,000 a year. In a lot of places, even less than that, right? Because they don't even get 8-hour shifts multiple times a week. So they might actually be around 12 or anywhere from like 10 around 10 grand in terms of earnings throughout the whole year. And to me, that's what's so sick about it, because I cannot support companies that despise that, like just again, this is what I'm trying to impart to people. None of these goddamn places would be able to stay afloat if it weren't for two groups. the customers and the workers. If both groups bailed on these stupid garbage jobs, they would be done. Now, of course, I don't expect a person who just wants to work, who's, obviously desperate to take home a paycheck, to suddenly be like, oh, I'm going to join this movement of ideological purity. But it is to say that when you think about how like these companies make their food ridiculously high, right? A burger for going for $13 or $16, right? And then the employees are only getting paid like 16 or 20 bucks per hour, which would sound all right, but then you realize, oh wait, they're only getting about anywhere from 5 to 15 hours on average. Like all of it is just, it's disgusting, because it's like the customers are getting ripped off, and the employees are too. The only people benefiting from the success of any of these places are the guys at the top. And I know that the profits that they make have no influence on how well they treat their employees, I should say. One day at my job, somebody came in and bought some order for I think it was either a party or a wedding, and the restaurant must have made, I think, like just $2,000 from that one order alone, right? A whole bunch of money in terms of what they normally make selling stuff that's around, on average priced at about 10 to 20 bucks for one order by itself. So they made a whole bunch of money from the order, right? And it had no influence on how much hours we did or didn't receive. And of course, somebody could say, oh, well, that's just one order. But again, the point is, even when they get those types of orders, even when people are buying more than they would expect to see, you still don't see any benefit from it. The only time, and I brought this up previously, that I was ever offered more hours after they started doing that one shift or two shift a week garbage was when I had coworkers who would call out sick or just not bother showing up. And that's why I made the video when how part-time jobs turn coworkers into enemies, because it's like, I shouldn't be hoping and praying that somebody else doesn't come to work so that my job will actually give me hours that are closer to 40 than 0. Like, I shouldn't be praying that everybody around me just decides, hey, you know what, to hell with this job, I'm gonna ghost them, screw this. That shouldn't be a thing, because I've been around people who have like what are considered decent jobs, and they are very annoyed and frustrated when their coworkers don't show, because that means more work for them. But with these places, they're so used to just having a whole bunch of employees that they're not paying worth a damn, that the only thing that incentivizes them to want to use you more is if everybody around you quits. Or again, doesn't come to work. So one way or the other, the only way you get a possible benefit is if everybody else just jumps out of there. And that's disgusting. It really is. Of course, I mentioned that one of the funniest things about going to that one interview I had, I think, what was it, 2 or 3 months ago, where the lady was like, oh, you don't seem to stay anywhere that long in your career. I'm like, woman, I was at that job for 18 months. I saw people who came after me leave. Some people would be there for, I'm not even joking, I think less than 3 weeks. A litany of people that tried those jobs, did them for a few days, a few weeks, said this is stupid, and then called out. They said, forget it. They tested their patience and they saw how far they were willing to go. Of course, I mentioned that the first time I wanted to quit that job was after about 3 months, when we had the wage increase, because that's when they started doing the 4 hour and 4 to 5 hour shifts instead of the usual 8 to 10 that we had previously. And I said, okay, well, this is not enough money, and if that's going to be all I can receive, then I'll go somewhere else. And the issue I kept running into was that getting a job showed itself to be just as difficult as it had been for me previously, and I just wasn't able to find anything else. And basically, I just kind of got lucky in the sense that over the following, I think, 5 or 6 months, a lot of people were either quitting or they were getting busy, and they were asking me to stay longer. And I was like, all right, whatever. And then things looked like they were finally appreciating me. And then when we got around to September, October is when they started doing the 2-in-1 shift crap, and then I had to just put up with that for over half a year, while still not being able to find anything. Because I mentioned that the biggest scam of last year, 2024, was just applying for jobs and going to interviews where the people schedule them, but they don't even show up themselves. And just to go on that topic, you have these clowns. They come online, and it's always the faceless pricks that act like they're so much better than somebody else. But one of the most repeated lies is this idea of someone lacking experience. Some it's almost like a corporal force. So this individual who, if they just had more experience, there would be so many opportunities available to them. If you just got a certificate in whatever the hell, if you just tried to go back to school and get this piece of paper, there'd be all these jobs available for you. And, I thought to myself, okay, first of all, I've never believed in the magic papers suddenly making a bunch of jobs appear to me. And I've already talked about how we're seeing more and more people where that's the reverse, where places are wanting new hires, college graduates to have experience, but then they don't have the experience because they were too busy trying to get the paper that was supposed to assure them a job. But the other part of it is like, do people really not understand where in a country where the majority of people don't have a degree, why do you need one to just have a job? Like not even, oh man, I want to be the CEO of this company. It's like just to work somewhere. There are crazy bastards on the computer that will try to convince you need a degree. And like that should be considered insane. Like when they write that stuff, people should ask them, are you okay? Did you slip out of your straitjacket? Because it's like, how did we get to a point where people hate each other so much that they will convince themselves, oh yeah, it's this guy's fault because he doesn't have this thing that most people don't have. Yeah. And it's like, what does he need that thing for? If we're seeing all these job listings, and this is where we go back to like the whole everything being upside down. Why do you need a degree or experience for entry level jobs? I applied to a job where I'm not kidding, in the description they said you need to have experience with hospitality. You need to come in here with a good smile and be nice, and of course it's just them saying, hey, just have a good attitude, and we'll give you training on just what kind of stuff is done. Literally, all that came out of me agreeing to that stuff was them showing me a bunch of tutorials on what to do, and then a rejection email a few days later. And again, it's like, do people really not understand where it's insane for jobs for companies to post, we're hiring, somebody work for us, please work for us, please. Oh, somebody just applied, rejected without even speaking to you. Like, no one thinks that's weird? That's crazy? That's utterly insane? And the part that kills me is that there are plenty of jobs that I get turned down for that I have experience in the field of. I see restaurants now hiring. I go in there, hey, you guys are hiring? Oh, you go on our website. Then you fill a thing on the website, hear nothing back. There was some kind of dog kennel attendant job where they ask, hey, you have to have experience with cleaning dogs. Like, okay, I've had dogs before, it's been a while, but still, I've worked around dogs. I've cleaned them. I've walked them. I've, done the basic things of just taking care of them in the past. So this shouldn't be an issue. But guess what? I got turned down. What did I do wrong? No idea. And again, it's like, what kills me the most, right? Entry level jobs, stuff that doesn't even have a set of requirements, is telling you you're not good enough for it. Well, why the hell am I not? And then, we go back to this part of equal opportunity. experience can only get you so far. There are people who talk about connections, and I agree with that. Although it seems like every time I'm connected to somebody, it's about as useful as cat piss. But what kills me is that I go into places, businesses, right, where I know for a matter of fact the people working there, they don't know what the hell they're doing. I go into this, just as for an example, this gas station. I asked for a refill on a soda. Now, when I first started getting my refills, this is the act of you buying a drink from there. You keep the cup so that you pay half off next time you show up. This is done by gas stations, 7-Eleven. So they all do this. But when I started getting a drink from there, it was 90 cents. Then they raised it to 165, and I said, okay, well, I just won't buy drinks from here that often anymore, right? So cut down how often I get a drink to mitigate the cost. And I kid you not, depending on who the cashier was, the drink would be 125, 135, 50 cents. Once, and like, I was sitting here thinking to myself, how the hell do you have all these employees and almost none of them actually know what the cost of their own crap is? It literally took one of the people working with this guy that was there for them to be for him to say, oh, the drinks are no longer 90 cents, they're 165, because like that's how long he was going, charging me less than everybody else that worked there. And I just have to say it, whole place was Hispanic. Am I really supposed to believe that some of these people are getting hired? And again, like, this isn't even about, oh man, someone stole the job I could have gotten if we just deported everybody, right? Because like that's stupid stuff. I'm talking about, there are so many places I go to where it's all one group, and you see the incompetence of the people working there, and you know damn well that the only reason they got the job is because of who they're friends with. Their buddy hooked them up. We talked about the same thing with 7-Eleven. I stopped applying to that place because every single time, and I applied, I lost count. It must have been 20 or 30 times. I even showed in one of my videos earlier this year. I think it was in my Unpopular Color 2. Every single time I applied to that goddamn place, I wouldn't hear anything back, except one time a rejection email like 5 years ago. And I said I was applying into the void, and it was pissing me off because I walk into those places, and again, people get mad about like the racial part. Oh, people are bigoted for saying that it's always Indians working in 7-Eleven. But it's like, we're really supposed to believe it's not a bunch of friends helping each other out, that they're not actually being discriminatory against other ethnic groups that want to work those jobs? Because think about this, like, I live in areas where it's like, and this isn't even like an opinion thing, I know this for a fact, they are about 50-50 black and Hispanic, right? Or maybe 30% white and then like 60% everybody else. So it'd be one thing if you go into one of these places and it's on some part of town where it's like mainly, right, Hispanic, and then it happens to be that the Hispanics are working those jobs, whatever. But it's like, you go into some of these, and this is not new, right? Because I've had people who've talked about how you'll go into a black neighborhood and you'll have other ethnic groups running, right, like liquor stores and just stuff like that. But again, this goes back to the same idea of, when I see one group in control of a particular type of job, I am not going to believe it has any goddamn thing to do with experience. They hire their friends. And look, I can say that their racism is playing a role both in the difficulty of getting a job and also my reluctance to really participate in the economy outside of essentials. Like, it's hard for me to walk into a 7-Eleven and know that this is the kind of work that I wouldn't mind doing, but am not allowed to, and not feel upset to the point of just going out of my way to never buy anything from there again. I talked about that job with the delivery driver place, and I'm sorry, but it's like, I start working there, and I'd mentioned, being hired to fire and whatnot. But am I really supposed to believe that there might not have been a racial element to the fact, like, okay, you work this place, most people working are Hispanic. The new hires, right, that they brought in together, like, I was the only black person that was there. It's like, I'm sorry, but that stuff doesn't, it just doesn't seem like it's coincidental. Like, oh yeah, well, uh, we're totally giving you a fair shot by trying to get rid of you after 48 hours of actually being on the job, or I would say even less than that. Just stuff like that. It's just weird. Like, it doesn't, I'm not going to sit here and pretend I don't see a clear pattern where there is a larger tolerance and willingness to work with, hire, and train people of a majority group within one of these different subsections of a company. But then if you're not part of that collective group, they toss you out of there, or they won't even bother hiring you in the first place. The stagnation of the job market this year bothered me in ways I've never felt before. I mean, it has gotten to the point where I go into some places and I just feel this immense frustration and bitterness. Because again, it's like people are working jobs that I know I'm qualified for, but because they're insistent on only hiring their group or not hiring at all, or if they do put up a listing, it's a scam, you can't get anything. It was real fun watching people in their little Christmas lights and, ooh, what are you going to get me? Because I sometimes go for long walks just around wherever I am. So like I observe couples and families and stuff. And I really do like think to myself, why is that something that you just cannot have, Because I remember going back to like the early days of doing this type of content. You would have these different guys who would talk trash about the way I look, and of course mostly or almost always hiding how they themselves look. They would speculate on what I owned and how I was around the different women, and it was sad because I've really thought hard about this stuff, right? And I've watched and explained the different factors that people never talk about, because everything always has to be the man's fault, of course. And I'm not going to, and never would have pretended that race doesn't play a role in this stuff. I have had multiple chicks, which I have proof of course, tell me that because of my ethnicity, I'm not good enough for them. I brought up how it was around this time last year, there was a woman who got high on Discord and asked me on a date, which I agreed to. And then after she was no longer high, she stated her problem with her refusal or reluctance to be with someone that was black. Of course, she also left out the part where she was still married to her husband and, whatever, just a whole bunch of things that she didn't bring up. But I also had another woman that was on Twitter who was talking about how she didn't believe in interracial couples. And, my thing with that was that I don't have a problem if someone has preferences of their own, but when you're going to tell me that I should not be, like we know that, keep it real, if you are a guy of minority, the most you're going to get from women will be members of your own ethnic group. And considering when you go on a website, any social media site, it's mostly people that are, other ethnic groups. That means you are already getting a much smaller piece of the pie in terms of who would even reciprocate things with you. So the idea that I'm supposed to be like, oh yeah, well, if a Hispanic or Asian or white woman thinks I'm attractive and I like her back, well, I can't be with her because random internet broad says that's a problem with and messing up the gene pool. Just stupid stuff. Because the truth is, for some men, you may actually have no options. And I don't know, it's like looking back on a lot of the women's stuff, it does feel predetermined when you start thinking of the racial aspect of this. People will often tell you that, oh, men are the ones who are obsessed with appearances and women care mostly about personality and you know, stability and all this other stuff. But how much of that do you really believe? Because, you know, I've talked before about how if I approach this stuff from the standpoint of, you know, you'll have a woman who will talk to a guy because she's bored, right? And she might genuinely like speaking to him. But in terms of becoming romantically involved with him, if his appearance is not something that she is content with, it, you know, all of the personality and, you know, whatever character traits that people think are attractive in the world would not make a difference. I mean, you see this with the chicks that are, you know, short, you know, 5'2", 5'3", 5'4", 5'5", but they go on these, well, 5'5" is okay, that's average height, but still, they, you know, they themselves are not exactly that tall, and they go on these dating websites, lusting specifically after guys who are 6 feet and above. And, you know, as someone who themselves is considered tall, I would say I have a preference, right, for a woman that would be like, you know, taller. But I would never allow that to be a requirement for who I find attractive, because if I sat here and excluded any woman that was under, you know, 5'7" or 5'8", again, it's like, get ready to be alone for the rest of your life, because it's just, it's not realistic. But of course, the racial stuff really took center stage for me. You know, back when I was talking about how when you go on sites like Backpage with these different hookers, they will put no AA. And that means no African Americans, no blacks. Some of them write a little bit differently, but you get the idea. They don't want any possible clients who are black. And somebody, some innocent person might go, oh, well, you know, you said you don't like hookers, that you would have nothing to do with them, so why would that bother you? And, you know, that's something I actually think there's some merit in addressing. So there's always this feeling that if you're a minority and you have the same skill set or abilities as a non-minority, you are still seen as illegitimate. So, for example, if I were to go into a business, right, like, so let's say Taco Bell, Wiener Schnitzel, McDonald's, and a white person orders a burger and it's $5, which get ready for it to be the size of a cookie if it's that low, but still. And I order a burger after them, and they tell me, hey, we know you have the same amount of money and you can afford this as the white person, but because your skin is dark, we don't want anything to do with you. It's like, yeah, that's, to me, that is what the hookers are doing when they put up crap of no AA. They are telling you that even if you have the legitimacy of being able to pay for their services, you are discriminated against because of something you have no control over. And, you know, I've said before that just like how businesses have the right to turn down people, right, and refuse service to anyone, these different, you know, chicks on Backpage and other sites have the right to put stuff like that up there. I just wish that I also had the right to call them racist whores and not have people get mad at me for stating something that's true. Like, if you went into any accredited business for a service and had the money to pay for it, and they told you, we're not going to do it because you're black, nobody would think that was a justified way of conducting things as someone that apparently is in the business of making money. You know, it's like, you think of all the companies, all the major ones, right? None of them would be crazy enough to refuse service to someone on the basis of their race. Because if you're an actual person who wants to be successful from a business standpoint, you are not going to want to possibly lower your clientele because you have some personal grievance with them on the basis of their ethnicity. And like I said, I went on Backpage a lot of times to just laugh at all the, you know, stupid, disgusting filth that was on there. But I say this sincerely. I never saw any other group that they told, I never saw no whites, no Hispanics. Like, you didn't see that for anyone else. I have this one relative. He and I haven't spoken in a few months because I just have been so fed up with everybody. But I have told him horror story after horror story about all the crazy stuff with these different women, and he's he believes in the magic woman. He says he at one point even told me that I was selling myself short. And I remember just thinking to just when I heard that line, I don't know if it was over the phone or in person, but like, he knows what my problem with them is, right? Which is that so many of them are against doing either short or long-term things that I like, right? The short-term things of like actually meeting someone in person, not this online crap. Long-term stuff of wanting to get married and have a family. You have women who are against doing that altogether. And it's like, it should be obvious to someone who has had that much of an extensive reoccurring dialogue with me that I don't control the fact that women, at a very large, rapid number, are turning down the prospect of ever having a family. So again, when he says, I'm selling myself short, I don't know how that line can be interpreted as anything other than, you call it cope, you call it misdirection, because if we were to actually attribute the blame to anybody, it would be the goddamn chicks that are all against doing what used to be basic, simple things. It used to be that if two people actually liked spending time together, they'd go and watch a movie, they'd go and like hang out, not, oh, I only want to talk to you if we're both at the job, which is actually something that multiple chicks at the longest serving job I had proposed to me, which I just wasn't interested in, so I cut off contact with a lot of them. But you get the idea that like, this is, that line is so, it's so sickening, because again, it is, I'm going to ignore the fact, like, I'm going to criticize you for being like, hey, look, this woman stuff, it's a waste of time, I don't get anything out of it, it's going to be this way forever. I'm going to criticize you for believing that, for withdrawing from this, but I'm not going to say anything about the very redundant pattern of you meeting all these different chicks that all want to do the same stupid thing, which is be, against having a family. I'm not going to critique so many of them for being opposed to this natural, like this formerly natural and basic stuff that you would just expect would be a possibility with someone that you actually cared about. And, that's, I guess, it's been a really interesting ride, right, over the period of the last, 8 or 9 years, to just go from being someone that wanted a date to now, like, again, some of this stuff with these chicks is so demented, and again, it's all like backwards to where I've turned them down. I don't want to date someone I can't touch. I don't want to have a relationship with someone I cannot see in person because they live in another country. And then if you meet someone that's within proximity to you, like the wonderful woman we talked about a few weeks ago, right? And her whole thing where she can't answer a private message, they show you signs that they don't want to actually do anything besides sit on the damn computer all day. I can show you a post from her where she admitted she has no real life friends. Which I wouldn't show that to insult her, but rather to say that, if it clearly, there's whatever part of her that recognizes that it's not a good thing to just be online all goddamn day long, will never prevent her from actually making any efforts to change that. And I say this all the time. For me to think something could change, right? Something could be different, I need evidence. I need to see a sign that this is not going to be the same old crap. Like when I was working the longest job I had, right? For the first probably 6 months, me and my friend would have this joke of like, oh, I'm probably going to get fired this month. I'm not going to be here for half a year, for 3 months. Because every job I'd had up to that point would try to get rid of me after the first month, or even, before that, like with the the pizza place and the whole trying to fire somebody on the first day. And as the months passed and we kept making our jokes, oh yeah, I bet I won't be here in a month. Oh, I won't be here in 5 months. I'll be gone soon. They're trying to as the months passed and time progressed, the possibility of me getting fired loosened or slimmed, and we both became more confident about the prospect of me staying there for a long time, which basically happened right over, 18 months or whatever. So when you get to this woman stuff, if the only thing you've ever known from them as a group, right, is having your time wasted, having them get mad at you for stuff that you really didn't think was that big of a deal, having them be against the things you want to do in the long term, so that even if you meet one of them that supposedly likes you back, you're still looking at her like, are you serious? Get out of my face. It's like, I'm sorry, but if your experience was with them have been bad for years and there's been no signs of progress, that things are going to turn in your favor, right? Because every year it's always the same crap, with the only variance being how many of them you run into and even would bother speaking with. I don't think you're wrong to say, yeah, this is probably not going to improve. And I'm honest. I'm honest, and I don't need to lie. I don't need to sit here and pretend to be something that I'm not. Like I said, all the people whose opinions I cared about are dead. So I say this with sincerity. Right now, there is a House race going on where I would need, if I wanted to become a member of the House of Representatives, I'd say about, it's got to be in around like 80 to 100,000 votes, right? You would sooner see me get close to 1/10 of a million votes in an election than you would see me meet a woman that wanted to have kids and lived close to me and, actually was like viable as a long-term partner. I've said before, you'd sooner see me with 1 million subscribers and 1 billion views, right? I'm not like, there is no one who's going to be able to convince me that they are going to change to such a degree that one of them will appear that is so unlike all the others. Like, you're like, literally, you would sooner convince me of Santa. And the truth is, I know that there are and there have been, and to a smaller degree there are still, decent quality women who want to meet a man and actually build something together. But as I've said before, it could be because of the racial aspect, right, where a lot of these chicks are having a problem with dating someone that's black, as we've talked before about and we've shown evidence of. It could also be, right, that just the long distance stuff is not appealing. The amount of women who are decent is in such a small array, right? The ones who are decent that want kids, that you would, again, it's like you're basically looking for a needle in a haystack. But it was so funny to think about, like, his comment of don't ask a woman if she wants to have kids, and then you had Triple L sitting up there talking about, I believe you would prematurely cut off a woman that was interested. Because basically what was funny about that is, I can show where both of them, made their belief of the magic woman, right, known. And you saw over the time where they spoke to me, they laid the seeds for when it doesn't happen, we can use this as a backdoor to blame you anyway. Oh, see, well, the reason that you didn't meet anyone is because you had to, you asked women if they wanted to have kids. Yeah. The reason you didn't meet anyone is because you prematurely cut them off. And, that, of course, I've talked before about how prematurely is, nebulous crap. And it's just, it's purposely vague so that there's always wiggle room. Oh, if you just spoke to this woman for another month or another 2 years, suddenly she would have been interested in you. And of course, I said that she, in particular, was so disgusting for writing that, because she was the like, of all the chicks I've spoken to trying to date them or be interested in them romantically, she was the one I talked to longest out of any of them up until the one I've been bringing up for the last few months, where that was like a whole year. But you get the idea. Like, you were spoken to for for damn near a whole calendar year, and you're like, he would prematurely cut off someone that was like, girl, go away. But just as an example of how all this stuff is for naught, there was this one woman I was talking with. Yeah, people are nasty to her. They make comments to her that are disgusting. They take pictures of her face and talk about how ugly she is. And I would joke and say, oh, she's, yeah, I do think she's pretty, but I was like, oh, she's beautiful. You're crazy, just like to kind of, do the reverse of them, where they put the woman down for her appearance, and I, lift her up because it's, I've never liked the whole thing of hiding your face and talking crap about the way somebody looks. I'm not a fan of that, regardless of who does it. But one day, she was arguing with someone who was like asking for her private information, and I said, if I had your stuff, I would send you flowers. And of course, this was meant by me as a joke. She has shown in the past that she's not really able to understand when I'm joking. And she responded to that by saying that I was out of line. And then she had all her little followers like dogpile me. I had like 5 or 6 different people trying to chastise me. And, I thought to myself, here's a woman who I've been defending and being, I would say, very pleasant with over what has now been almost half a year. And I just said, if she at this point still cannot understand what a joke is, or gets like so offended as to sick her little group of, sidekicks on me, I just said to hell with it. And I didn't even respond to her. I just unfollowed her and walked away. And, I was thinking about Triple L's comment, right? A prematurely cuff woman that's interested. But it's like, again, this lady, I've been talking to her for almost half a year. And all that time, I've never, there's no progression. Like, she didn't follow me back. Which meant I couldn't like send her a private message. Nothing changed. You spoke to her month after month, not every day, but frequent basis, right? And nothing happened. There was no advancements. I mean, like, it really feels at this point like some people, a lot of these different chicks, a lot of these different guys online, they only exist to waste the world's time. Like, there's no reason for me to be speaking to some, like, people get mad again if you're like, oh, you don't want to talk to a woman who doesn't want to have kids. Like, but honestly, if I have so much more respect for one of them who just says outright, I don't want to do this. I would never be interested in doing this, because I don't want to waste my time talking to someone who doesn't have the same end goals. Like, if you live in California and you're talking to some woman that lives in, I don't know, my grandma's home state of South Carolina, and she says, oh, I don't ever want to leave SC for as long as I, can breathe. It's like, yeah, I don't want you. I'm not interested in flying all the way over there every time I want to do something. So again, it's like, what are we doing here? Like, I'd rather she tell me up front, hey, look, man, sorry, but I'm not doing this long term, than sit here and play all this weird crap. Like, I don't know why it's such an issue to just get to the point, like, it's amazing how people just, they get mad at me for being tired of riding the thought train. That hole over there. They think you're supposed to spend the rest of your life chasing these time wasters. But I'm tired of riding the thought train. All aboard. Choo choo. It's like, it's stupid. Like, what talking to one of them with all the deficiencies and weird stuff and just lack of any advancement or whatever that they've shown me in years is the same thing as if someone said, hey, can you get in this car and drive it? By the way, it has no engine. Like, okay, if I know the car has no engine, I'm not going to even waste my time opening the door and taking the keys. Like, I know from the second that I'm in this thing, I'm not going to go any further with it. And them not wanting to have kids is a non-starter. But yeah, I started this off trying to figure out why I was tearing up on Christmas Eve. I get, hey, maybe that was part of the reason, just thinking like, wow, every year is going to be this. It's going to be me on a holiday or just any old average day. Maybe you'll go to an eventual job. Maybe you'll talk to like a person that you're friendly with on Discord or on, it's some other messenger thing. But for the most part, you'll be sitting by yourself, waiting for, I guess, the day to pass and to get back to work or whatever other objective you have. And that's To me, it's just so frustrating because, again, when someone spends so much time either in the presence of people that actually gave a crap about them and then they all die, or they try to like develop things with newer people who are just not interested in doing anything with them, it's frustrating. It just plays back into that same overarching theme that nothing will be gained. Like you will lose everything year by year, right? No available jobs. So you'll just keep sinking down the further bottom of whatever because you just can't make anything off anywhere because nobody wants to hire anybody. And more people that you cared about will die, right? And you'll just like, again, it's like, what about this is exciting or appealing? Like, I asked that question sincerely. Like, if people really can understand where I would get disillusioned, um, there's not much else for me to say. And this goes back to like why I brought up the whole point of people who always are trying to make fun of somebody for being an adult but not able to take care of themselves. Again, what I appreciated about that relative so much was that she saw the degradation, right? She saw the 2008 subprime mortgage crisis. People were getting kicked out of their houses and losing their homes. She saw all the times I would drive or go over to an interview, and she understood that stuff was so goddamn expensive that a person might need help even if they're an adult. And it's been a real interesting experience over the last several years to just watch the lack of empathy from the people who are supposed to care the most about you. I've even said that if I knew how things were going to turn out, back when I was a kid, like, around 10, 11, 12, I probably would just killed myself back then, because it's like all the people that are worth anything are going to die, and then all the ones that won't do anything but serve empty words are going to live, and you're going to like be told by these other people that, oh, see, it's okay for them to not help you while they're not missing a meal, while they're not worried about getting kicked out of wherever they're living. That's all right. That's okay. Like, I couldn't understand how someone could have a son who they haven't spoken to in years. They have his number. They know they have some pretty good idea of like where he is, and they just don't care. Like I literally could not imagine at any point ever, right? I reproduce, and I'm holding this baby, and maybe I'm not the most, which this would not be the case if it were me, but still, like, I'm around sometimes here or there, but I have like I know them, they know me, they know, of course they know my parents way more than me, but it's like I couldn't imagine that there would be a human being who exists because of me, and I just don't speak to them for years, and like think that's normal. Because me and my friend, we're not parents, but it's that same thing of like, how do you create life and then just totally abandon it? And the sad part is, it's not even the first time we've seen this. I had, I talked about the dingbat with the baby, and it's like, you saw the same thing with her, where her mom, after she was born, flew to another state, totally abandoned her, and then went and had some more kids. Oh, I couldn't take care of my first kids, I'll just spit out some more. Brilliant strategy. But again, they don't care. Now, again, people come online and they make fun of me for what I wear. They talk, trash about what I'm sitting in, and they've run the gauntlet in terms of just having different problems with me. But let me say this: if I had a child who didn't want to speak to me, and like they just were actively trying to not see me, or I was trying to not see them, right, for days, weeks, or months, I would be embarrassed. If I were so money hungry that I would look at a person who is unemployed, and I know they're unemployed, and try to squeeze money out of them to where their only recourse is to flee from being around me, right? They would rather risk being on the streets than with me, because I've given them the option of either having somewhere to live or having some way to feed themselves. I would be embarrassed. I mean, I just find it funny how people will come on my channel and try to make me feel bad about doing a video they don't like or wearing something they don't like. But nobody goes over to the channel of a father and makes fun of him for the fact that he'd forgotten his own son. Nobody says anything to him. But yeah, I guess that was the issue this past Christmas Eve. Just the ever apparent realization I will always be alone. And I maintain that there are some people who, no matter how hard they try, no matter what they do, they just can't form any real connections with people. I do think that, social media plays a role in it. There are a lot of younger people that would rather stare at their phones than actually talk to individuals in real life. Of course, that woman I brought up earlier, not the one that did the stupid thing about the private information, but the one that was I mentioned that she lives in the same state as me and I could drive to her if she wanted me to see her. She admitted that she will sit in her room all day long, just on Twitter, just nothing, no actual people to hang out with, and will just sit on the computer all day. And again, it's that's the kind of stuff I find so just weird. Because again, I'm sure she would have no issue whatsoever meeting someone that wanted to spend time with her, myself included. But you can't do that with people that don't reciprocate. I'm never going to feel ashamed of telling the truth. If I think something is ridiculous or crazy, I'm not going to pretend that it's normal for the sake of not offending somebody. People online get upset by everything. And I wish I could have a better forecast for next year, but I know my fate all too well to believe that things are going to improve for the most part. Again, the job thing is still something that could change, but the rest of it is only going to get worse.